The blood on her dress had dried to the color of rust by the time Xander Whitmore found her stumbling along the canyon road. One hand pressed against the rocks for balance, the other clutching her side. He had been tracking a runaway stallion for 3 days through the Sierra Nevada foothills, and the last thing he expected on that scorching July afternoon in 1876 was to find a woman barely alive, making her way through the wilderness outside Truckee, California. She collapsed before he could reach her, her knees buckling as though someone had cut the strings holding her upright. Xander jumped down from his horse, his boots hitting the dusty ground hard as he ran toward her. When he turned her over gently, he saw her face was streaked with dirt and tears, her lips cracked from dehydration, and her eyes, the color of storm clouds, looked up at him with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. "Water," she whispered, her voice barely audible. He uncapped his canteen and lifted her head, letting her drink slowly. She gulped it down greedily at first, but he pulled it back, knowing too much too fast would make her sick. Her breathing was ragged, and he could see the way she winced with each shallow breath. When he looked down at where her hand had been pressed against her side, he saw the fabric of her blue cotton dress was torn and stained dark. "Who did this to you?" Xander asked, his voice rough with anger he did not try to hide. She shook her head, eyes closing as if the memory was too much to bear. "They are gone now, dead or far away, it does not matter. It matters if they are coming after you. They are not." Her certainty made him believe her. "Please, I need to get somewhere safe, anywhere but here." Xander looked around the desolate canyon road. The nearest town was Truckee, about 8 miles north, but in her condition, he was not sure she would make it that far on horseback. There was an old line shack he knew about, maybe 2 miles west, tucked into the pines where he had stayed during a particularly harsh winter 2 years back. It would have to do. "Can you ride?" he asked. She nodded, though he saw the lie in her eyes. She could barely sit up, let alone stay mounted on a horse for 2 miles. But he admired her determination, the steel in her spine that kept her from giving up entirely. He lifted her as gently as he could, and she bit back a cry of pain. Up close, he could see more injuries, bruises along her collarbone disappearing beneath the neckline of her dress, a cut above her eyebrow that had bled and dried. Whoever had done this to her had been thorough and cruel. Xander settled her in front of him on his horse, keeping one arm wrapped firmly around her waist to hold her steady. She leaned back against his chest, and he could feel how much effort it took for her to stay conscious. As they rode toward the line shack, she drifted in and out, sometimes murmuring things he could not quite make out. The shack was still standing, though it looked more weathered than he remembered. He dismounted carefully, then reached up to lift her down. Inside, the single room was dusty but dry, with an old iron stove in one corner and a narrow cot against the wall. He laid her on the cot, then went back outside to tend to his horse and gather wood for a fire. By the time he returned, she was awake again, watching him with those storm cloud eyes. There was intelligence in that gaze and wariness, as though she was trying to figure out whether she had traded one danger for another. "I am not going to hurt you," Xander said, reading her thoughts, "but I need to look at your injuries. You are bleeding through your dress." She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I know. I think one of my ribs might be broken too. It hurts to breathe." He knelt beside the cot and helped her sit up enough to examine the wound on her side. When he lifted the torn fabric, he saw a deep gash that needed cleaning and stitching. But what caught his attention, what made his hand still for just a moment, were the older scars he saw on her skin. Some were thin white lines, faded with time. Others were rougher, more recent, the kind that came from violence that was not a one-time occurrence but a pattern. She saw him looking and pulled away, trying to cover herself. Her face flushed with shame that made Xander's heart clench. "I have medical supplies in my saddlebag," he said quietly, pretending he had not seen anything. "This is going to hurt, but I need to clean this wound before infection sets in." She nodded again, biting her lower lip. He worked as gently as he could, cleaning the gash with whiskey that made her gasp and grip the edge of the cot until her knuckles turned white. Then he stitched it closed with the needle and thread he kept for mending tack, each careful stitch making her flinch despite her efforts to stay still. Through it all, she did not cry out, did not beg him to stop, and he found himself respecting this stranger more with each passing moment. When he finished, he wrapped clean bandages around her middle, his hands impersonal and efficient. "You need rest, and food when your stomach can handle it. How long has it been since you ate?" "2 days," she admitted. "Maybe 3, I lost track." Xander had some dried beef and hardtack in his pack, and he made a thin broth using water from the creek nearby, and some wild onions he found growing along the bank. She managed a few spoonfuls before exhaustion claimed her, and she fell into a deep sleep that looked more like unconsciousness. He sat in the rickety chair by the door, his rifle across his lap, and watched over her as the sun set and darkness filled the shack. He lit a small fire in the stove, just enough to keep the chill off, and thought about the woman lying on the cot. She had not told him her name. She had not told him anything, really, except that whoever had hurt her was gone. But those scars told a story all their own, and it was a story that made anger burn hot in his chest. The next morning, she woke with a fever. Her skin was hot to the touch, and she was delirious, murmuring names and fragments of sentences that made no sense. Xander spent the day cooling her down with creek water, making her drink when she was lucid enough, and worrying that he had not gotten her to a proper doctor in time. By the second night, the fever broke, and she woke clear-headed but weak. She looked at him in the dim light of the stove fire, and for the first time, he saw something like gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you," she said, her voice hoarse. "You did not have to help me." "Yes, I did," Xander replied simply. "What is your name?" She was quiet for so long he thought she might not answer. Then, finally, "Priscilla Vaughn. People used to call me Pris." "Used to, before." She did not elaborate, and he did not push. "I am Xander Whitmore. I have a ranch about 40 miles south of Truckee. I was tracking a stallion when I found you. Did you catch him?" "No, but that does not matter now." Priscilla looked away. "You should go back to your tracking. I will be fine here." "You cannot even stand up without help," Xander pointed out. "And you are in the middle of nowhere with no supplies. You will not be fine." "I have survived worse." The way she said it, flat and matter-of-fact, told him it was true, but it also told him she had been surviving alone for a long time, and maybe she did not know any other way. "You do not have to survive alone this time," he said. She looked at him then, really looked at him as though trying to see into his soul. "Why are you doing this? You do not know me. I could be a criminal. I could be dangerous. You are hurt and alone. That is all I need to know." Most men would not see it that way. "I am not most men." A ghost of a smile crossed her face there and gone in an instant. "No, I suppose you are not." Over the next few days, Priscilla slowly regained her strength. Xander hunted rabbit and quail, made simple meals over the stove, and changed her bandages twice a day. They talked sometimes, careful conversations that skirted around the painful topics neither was ready to broach. He learned she was 23, originally from Missouri, and had come west 3 years ago. She learned he was 27, had been ranching since he was 16 after his father died, and had never been married. Why not? She asked one evening as they sat outside the shack, watching the stars come out over the mountains. Xander shrugged. "Never found the right woman, I suppose. and I have been busy building up the ranch. Did not seem like the right time. Is there ever a right time for love? The question hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning he was not sure either of them was ready to examine. I do not know, he admitted. Is there? Priscilla pulled her knees up to her chest, careful of her healing ribs. I used to think so. I used to think there was a right time and a right person, and if you just waited patiently, everything would fall into place like pieces of a puzzle. You do not think that anymore. No. The single word was heavy with pain and loss. I think sometimes life just happens to you, and you have to deal with it as best you can. Xander wanted to ask what had happened to her, who had put those scars on her body and that shadow in her eyes. But he sensed she would tell him when she was ready, if she ever was, and pushing would only drive her away. On the 7th day after he found her, Priscilla was finally strong enough to walk outside without help. She still moved carefully, one hand pressed against her bandaged ribs, but there was color in her cheeks again and determination in her step. She walked to the creek and sat on a flat rock, trailing her fingers in the cold mountain water. Xander joined her, sitting close enough to help if she needed it but far enough to give her space. The silence between them had become comfortable over the past week, but he sensed something shifting, some decision being made behind those storm cloud eyes. I was married, Priscilla said suddenly, still looking at the water. His name was Robert Vaughn. We married when I was 19, and I thought he was everything I had ever wanted. Handsome, charming, successful. He owned a saloon in Virginia City, Nevada, and people respected him. Xander stayed quiet, letting her tell the story at her own pace. It started small. A harsh word here, a rough grip on my arm there. I told myself he was just stressed, that running a business was hard, that it would get better. But it did not get better. It got worse. Her voice was steady, but he could hear the effort it took to keep it that way. The first time he hit me was 6 months after we married. He apologized, brought me flowers, swore it would never happen again, and I believed him because I wanted to believe him. She finally looked at Xander, and the raw pain in her eyes made him want to pull her close and promise that no one would ever hurt her again. It happened again, and again, and again. Each time he was sorrier, each time he promised to change. And each time I stayed because I did not know where else to go. My parents were dead, I had no siblings, no friends who could help, because he had made sure to isolate me from anyone who might have cared. The scars, Xander said quietly, some are from him. Some are from his business partner, when Robert was too drunk to finish what he started. Some are from things I would rather not talk about. She pulled her hand from the water and wrapped her arms around herself. 3 weeks ago, I finally decided I had had enough. I stole money from the saloon safe, waited until they were both passed out drunk, and I ran. I made it as far as the California border before they caught up with me. On the canyon road, she nodded. Robert had a gun. He said if I would not come back with him, he would make sure I never ran again. We fought. The gun went off. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. He fell, hit his head on a rock. I checked, and he was dead. His partner, a man named Dutch, he tried to grab me. We fought too. I had a knife I had stolen from the saloon kitchen. I stabbed him. I do not know if I killed him or just hurt him badly, but he was bleeding a lot when I ran. So you have been running ever since? Yes. I thought if I could get far enough away, maybe I could start over. Maybe I could find somewhere no one knew me, no one knew what I had done. Xander reached over and took her hand, folding it gently between both of his. You defended yourself. That is not a crime. The law might see it differently. I am a woman who killed her husband and stabbed his partner. Who is going to believe my story? I believe you. The simple statement made her eyes fill with tears. You do not even know me. I know enough. I know you are strong and brave. I know you survived something that would have broken most people. I know you did what you had to do to stay alive." He squeezed her hand gently. "And I know that you do not deserve to spend the rest of your life running. What choice do I have? You could stay." The words were out before he could stop them, but once they were said, he realized he meant them. Over the past week, something had shifted inside him. This woman, with her scars and her pain and her fierce determination to survive, had worked her way into his heart without him even realizing it was happening. "Stay where?" Priscilla asked, her voice shaky. "With me, at my ranch. I could use help, and you need somewhere safe. We could say you are my cousin from back east if anyone asks. No one in Truckee knows me well enough to question it. You would do that for me. Risk your reputation, your ranch, everything for a woman you barely know." "Yes." She stared at him, searching his face for any sign of deception or ulterior motive. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her because she nodded slowly. "Okay, but only until I am strong enough to move on. I will not let you risk everything for me." "We will see," Xander said, and deep down, he knew he would do whatever it took to make her feel safe enough to stay permanently. They left the line shack 2 days later, riding double on Xander's horse because Priscilla was still too weak to sit a horse alone for long distances. The 40-mile journey to his ranch took them 2 full days, stopping frequently to let her rest. They avoided Truckee, taking the longer route through the mountain passes, just in case someone was looking for a woman matching her description. The Whitmore Ranch was nestled in a valley where the pines gave way to open grassland, with the Sierra Nevada mountains rising majestic and snow capped in the distance. The main house was a sturdy log structure that Xander had built himself over the course of 2 years, with a wide front porch and windows that let in the morning sun. There was a barn, a chicken coop, a small corral, and about 200 acres of grazing land for his cattle and horses. Priscilla looked around with wide eyes as they rode up to the house. "You built all this yourself?" "Most of it. Had some help with the barn from neighbors, and I hired a few ranch hands during spring roundup, but yeah, mostly it was just me." "It is beautiful." The genuine admiration in her voice made him sit a little straighter in the saddle. He had worked hard to build this place into something he could be proud of, and hearing her appreciation meant more than it probably should have. He helped her down from the horse and led her inside. The interior was simple but comfortable, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall of the main room, a kitchen area with a cast iron stove, and 2 bedrooms off a short hallway. Xander showed her to the smaller bedroom, which had a bed with a quilt his mother had made before she died, a washstand, and a trunk for clothes. "This is yours for as long as you need it," he said. "There is a pump outside for water and the outhouse is behind the barn. I will bring your things in." "I do not have any things," Priscilla reminded him. "Just what I am wearing. Then we will get you some things. I need to go into Truckee in a few days for supplies anyway. We can get you some fabric and whatever else you need." She looked at him with that searching gaze again. "Why are you being so kind to me?" "Because you need kindness. And because I want to." That night, Xander made dinner while Priscilla rested in her room. He had shot a deer the week before and had venison steaks in the cold cellar, along with potatoes and carrots from his garden. It was a better meal than the rabbit and broth they had been living on at the line shack, and he hoped it would help her regain her strength faster. When he called her for dinner, she emerged wearing one of his old shirts over her dress because the evening had turned cool. The shirt hung on her like a tent, but somehow she made it look right. They ate at the rough-hewn table in the kitchen, the silence between them no longer awkward but companionable. "Tell me about your ranch," Priscilla said as she carefully cut her meat into small pieces. "What do you do here besides raise cattle?" Xander was grateful for the neutral topic. I have about 100 head of cattle right now, mostly shorethorns. I am trying to build the herd up to 200 by next year. I also break and train horses, which is what I do best, honestly. The stallion I was tracking when I found you, he is a paint with the best bloodlines I have ever seen. If I can catch him and get him broke to ride, he could be the foundation for a whole new line of working horses. Will you go back and look for him? Eventually. But there is no rush. He has been running wild in those mountains for months. A few more weeks will not make much difference. They talked late into the night, the conversation flowing easier than it had at the line shack. She told him about growing up in Missouri, about her mother who had been a school teacher and her father who had worked on the railroad. He told her about learning to ranch from his father, about the hard years after his mother died of pneumonia, and his father followed 6 months later, leaving 16-year-old Xander to figure out how to survive on his own. "You were so young," Priscilla said. "How did you manage?" "I did not have a choice. It was manage or lose everything my parents had worked for, so I managed," he shrugged. "Some days were harder than others. Some days I was not sure I would make it through, but I did. You are stronger than you think. So are you." The look they shared across the table was charged with something neither was quite ready to name. But it was there, undeniable and growing stronger with each passing day. 3 days later, Xander hitched up his wagon and they rode into Truckee together. It was Priscilla's first time seeing the town, a rough and tumble collection of buildings that had sprung up to serve the railroad workers and miners passing through. The main street was wide and dusty, lined with saloons, a general store, a hotel, and a small church with a white steeple. Xander had told her to stay in the wagon while he loaded supplies, but Priscilla insisted on coming into the general store with him. "I need to pick out fabric myself," she said firmly, "and I have been cooped up for too long. I need to feel like a normal person again." Inside the store, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes greeted them. "Xander Whitmore, I have not seen you in town for weeks. How is everything at the ranch?" "Good, Mrs. Patterson. I have brought my cousin with me today. This is Priscilla from Missouri. She's going to be staying with me for a while, helping out around the place." Mrs. Patterson's eyes sharpened with curiosity, but her smile remained warm. "How lovely to meet you, dear. Welcome to Truckee. If you need anything at all, you just let me know." Priscilla smiled back, and Xander noticed how she had automatically shifted into the role of genteel Eastern lady, her posture straighter, her voice softer. "Thank you, Mrs. Patterson. That is very kind." They spent an hour in the store, selecting fabric for dresses, practical work clothes, and all the other supplies Priscilla would need. Mrs. Patterson seemed delighted to help, chattering away about the town gossip and asking polite questions about Missouri that Priscilla fielded with practiced ease. As they were loading the wagon, a man approached them. He was tall and thin, with a sheriff's badge pinned to his vest. "Xander," he said with a nod. "Heard you had company. Sheriff Morrison, this is my cousin Priscilla visiting from Missouri." The sheriff tipped his hat to Priscilla. "Madam, how long are you planning to stay in our little town?" "I am not sure yet," Priscilla said, her voice steady despite the fear Xander could see in her eyes. "It depends on how things go." "Well, I hope you enjoy your stay. And Xander, if you ever need anything, you know where to find me." It was a simple exchange, but Xander noticed the way the sheriff's eyes lingered on Priscilla, and he wondered if there had been any word about a woman wanted for killing her husband in Virginia City. As they rode out of town, he could feel the tension radiating from Priscilla. "He knows something," she said once they were well out of earshot. "Maybe, or maybe he is just being a sheriff checking on newcomers. Either way, we need to be careful. I should leave. I am putting you in danger just by being here." "You are not going anywhere," Xander said firmly. "We will deal with whatever comes. Together." The words seemed to settle something in her, and she leaned against his shoulder as they rode, the contact natural and right. Over the following weeks, they fell into a rhythm of daily life. Priscilla proved to be a hard worker despite her injuries, insisting on helping with the cooking, the garden, and the chickens. She sewed new dresses for herself from the fabric they had bought, and Xander found himself looking forward to seeing what she would wear each day. He taught her to ride properly, starting her on his gentlest mare. She was nervous at first, but her natural determination won out, and soon she was riding confidently around the property. He taught her to shoot too, because he wanted her to be able to defend herself if she ever needed to. One afternoon, as they were working together to mend a section of fence, Priscilla suddenly stopped and looked at him. "Why are you doing all this?" Xander hammered in another nail before answering. "Doing what?" "Teaching me things, helping me become stronger." "Most men would want to keep a woman dependent." "I am not most men," he said, echoing his words from the line shack. "And I do not want you to be dependent on me. I want you to be able to stand on your own 2 feet, to know you can take care of yourself if you need to." "Why?" He set down the hammer and looked at her directly. "Because you deserve that freedom. You deserve to know you are strong enough to handle whatever comes your way. And because when you choose to stay, I want it to be because you want to, not because you have no other option." "When I choose to stay," she repeated softly. "Not if." "Not if," he confirmed. She smiled then, a real smile that lit up her whole face and made his heart skip a beat. "You are assuming a lot, Cowboy, maybe. But I am good at reading signs, and all the signs point to you wanting to stay just as much as I want you to." She did not deny it. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and orange, Priscilla reached over and took his hand. It was the first time she had initiated contact, and Xander held very still, afraid to break the moment. "I am falling in love with you," she said quietly. "I did not want to. I tried not to, but I am." His heart was pounding so hard he was sure she could hear it. "I fell in love with you the moment I saw those scars and realized what you had survived, not because of the scars, but because of the strength it took to keep going despite them." "I am damaged," she whispered. "I have so much history, so much pain." "You could have any woman you want, someone whole and unscarred. I want you, all of you, the scars, the pain, the strength, the courage. I want every part of you, Priscilla." She turned to face him, tears streaming down her face. "I am afraid. What if I am not enough? What if I cannot be what you need? You are already more than enough. You are everything." He kissed her then, gentle and careful, as though she were something precious that might break. She kissed him back with a desperation that spoke of all the loneliness and fear she had carried for so long. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "Please do not leave me here," she whispered against his chest. "Do not leave me alone in this feeling." "Never," Xander promised. "I saw your scars and I am staying forever, you hear me? Forever." She nodded, clinging to him as the sun disappeared behind the mountains and the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky. The next few months were the happiest either of them had ever known. They worked the ranch together during the day, their partnership seamless and natural. At night, they sat on the porch or by the fire, talking about everything and nothing, learning each other in ways that went far beyond words. Xander was patient with her fear of intimacy, understanding that her experiences with her husband had left deep wounds that would take time to heal. He never pushed, never demanded more than she was ready to give. And slowly, carefully, Priscilla began to trust that this was different, that he was different. One night in late October, as the first snow dusted the mountain peaks, she came to his room. He was reading by lamplight and he looked up in surprise when she entered, "I want to be with you," she said simply. "Really be with you if you still want me." "I will always want you," he replied, setting the book aside. "But only if you are sure, only if you are ready." "I am sure, I am ready. I love you, Xander, and I want to show you that in every way possible." What happened between them that night was tender and healing, a reclaiming of something that had been twisted and painful and making it beautiful. He was gentle with her scars, both the visible ones and the invisible ones, and she found herself crying not from pain but from the sheer relief of being touched with love instead of violence. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in his bed, she whispered, "Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing me, the real me, for staying when you saw my scars instead of running away." "I could never run from you," he murmured against her hair. "You are my home now." In December, Sheriff Morrison rode out to the ranch. Xander saw him coming from a distance and felt his stomach drop. Priscilla was in the kitchen making bread, and he called to her through the window. "The sheriff is here. Stay inside and let me handle this." He met Morrison in the yard, his expression carefully neutral. "Sheriff, what brings you out this way?" "Got a telegram a few days ago from Virginia City," Morrison said without preamble. "They are looking for a woman named Priscilla Vaughn, wanted for the murder of her husband and the attempted murder of his business partner." Xander's blood ran cold, but he kept his voice steady. "What does that have to do with me? The description matches your cousin pretty closely. I need to talk to her. She is not involved in whatever happened in Virginia City. Then she will not mind answering a few questions." Xander saw Priscilla emerge from the house, her face pale but her spine straight. "I will answer your questions, Sheriff. I have nothing to hide." Morrison dismounted and approached the porch. "Are you Priscilla Vaughn?" "I am." "Did you kill your husband, Robert Vaughn, on or about the 25th of July this year?" Priscilla met his gaze without flinching. "I defended myself against a man who was trying to kill me. If he died as a result, it was because he fell and hit his head during the struggle. I did not murder him in cold blood. And his partner, Dutch Carver, I stabbed him when he tried to drag me back to Virginia City. I do not know if he survived or not." Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Dutch Carver survived. He healed up and started talking. He told everyone that you murdered Robert in cold blood over money, that you seduced him, and then killed him when he tried to stop you from robbing the saloon." "That is a lie," Priscilla said, her voice shaking with anger. "Robert Vaughn beat me regularly for 3 years. He isolated me from anyone who might help. That money I took was mine, earned by enduring his abuse. Dutch Carver was just as bad as Robert. They both took pleasure in hurting me. Can you prove any of that?" "My scars prove it," she said, and began unbuttoning her sleeve to show the marks on her arm. Morrison held up a hand. "That will not be necessary, madam. I have seen enough scars in my time to know what they mean." He sighed heavily. "The problem is, Virginia City does not care about your side of the story. They want you back to stand trial. And technically, I am supposed to arrest you and transport you there." "Then do it," Priscilla said quietly. "I will not run anymore. I will face whatever comes." "The hell you will," Xander said, stepping between her and the sheriff. "She defended herself. That is not murder." "I agree with you," Morrison said. "Which is why I rode all the way out here instead of sending a deputy, which is why I am telling you both that I never received that telegram. As far as I know, Priscilla Whitmore, your wife and Xander's cousin from Missouri, has been living here peacefully for months. The woman they are looking for in Virginia City must be someone else entirely." Xander stared at him. "You would do that? Risk your job?" "I became a sheriff to protect people, not to deliver innocent women to corrupt men who want revenge." Morrison fixed them both with a stern look. "But you need to make this official. Get married, change her name legally, make her disappearance from Virginia City permanent. Can you do that?" "Yes," Xander said immediately. "We can do that." "Good. I will expect you both in town next week with a marriage license. Until then, as far as I am concerned, this conversation never happened." He tipped his hat to them both, mounted his horse, and rode away, leaving Xander and Priscilla staring after him in stunned silence. "He just saved my life," Priscilla said softly. "He did. And he is right, we need to make this official." She turned to look at him. "You do not have to marry me just to protect me. I will not trap you into something you do not want. I have wanted to marry you since that first day on the porch when you told me you were falling in love with me." He took both her hands in his. "I was just waiting for the right moment to ask. Looks like the moment found us instead. So you are proposing to me out of necessity. I am proposing to you because I love you and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. The necessity just made me do it sooner than I planned." He dropped to one knee right there in the yard, still holding her hands. "Priscilla Vaughn, will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner, my love for as long as we both live?" She was crying again, but this time they were tears of joy. "Yes, yes, I will marry you." They were married the following week in the small church in Truckee, with Sheriff Morrison and Mrs. Patterson as witnesses. Priscilla wore a simple blue dress she had made herself, and Xander wore his best suit. The ceremony was short and sweet, and when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Xander kissed her with all the love and promise he held in his heart. Afterward, they filed the marriage certificate with the county clerk, officially changing Priscilla's name to Priscilla Whitmore. It was a small act, but it felt like shedding an old skin and emerging new and clean on the other side. That winter was harsh, with heavy snows that kept them close to home for weeks at a time. But they did not mind. They had each other, and that was enough. They spent long evenings by the fire, Priscilla sewing or reading while Xander worked on tack or planned improvements for the ranch. They talked about their future, about the children they hoped to have, about growing old together in this valley they both loved. In February, Priscilla realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks but had been afraid to hope, afraid that her body, damaged by years of abuse, might not be able to carry a child. But as the signs became unmistakable, she finally told Xander one morning over breakfast. He was so happy he picked her up and spun her around, then immediately set her down with apologies, worried he had been too rough. She laughed and kissed him and told him she was not made of glass, that pregnancy was natural, and she was strong enough to handle it. The baby came in late September of 1877, a healthy boy with Xander's dark hair and Priscilla's gray eyes. They named him Thomas, after Xander's father, and he was the most perfect thing either of them had ever seen. Priscilla proved to be a natural mother, despite her fears that she would not know how to love a child properly after experiencing so little love herself. But watching her with their son, Xander saw only tenderness and devotion. She sang to Thomas, rocked him when he cried, and protected him with a fierce intensity that reminded Xander of a she-bear with her cub. Life settled into a new rhythm with a baby in the house. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. Xander finally caught that paint stallion and broke him to ride, and the horse became the foundation of a successful breeding program. They hired a young cowhand named Jesse to help with the work, a quiet boy of 19 who proved to be reliable and trustworthy. Priscilla bloomed in her new life. The haunted look gradually faded from her eyes, replaced by contentment and peace. Her scars remained, physical reminders of what she had survived, but they no longer defined her. She was more than her past. She was a wife, a mother, a rancher's partner, and a woman who had claimed her own strength. 2 years after Thomas was born, They had a daughter they named Charlotte. She had red hair like Priscilla's grandmother and a stubborn streak that made both parents laugh. Thomas adored his little sister, and watching them play together filled the house with a joy that sometimes overwhelmed Priscilla with its intensity. One evening, when the children were asleep and she and Xander were sitting on the porch as they had so many times before, she said, "Do you remember that first night when I told you I was falling in love with you? I remember every moment of that night. I told you I was afraid I would not be enough for you, that I was too damaged. I remember that too. I want you to know that I am not afraid anymore. You showed me what love really is. You showed me that scars do not make you weak, they make you strong. And you gave me a life I never dreamed I could have." Xander pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair. "You gave me just as much. Before you, I was just existing, going through the motions. You taught me how to really live. We saved each other," she said softly. "Yeah, I guess we did." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. In the distance, they could hear cattle lowing and the wind rustling through the pines. It was the sound of home, of peace, of a life built together through love and determination. Years passed, marked by the changing seasons and the growth of their children. Thomas grew into a strong, thoughtful boy who loved working with the horses as much as his father did. Charlotte was wild and fearless, always climbing trees or racing her horse across the meadow despite her mother's worried calls to be careful. In 1883, they had another son, Samuel, and in 1885, twin girls they named Rose and Lily. The house that had once seemed too big for just Xander now rang with the voices and laughter of 5 children. It was chaotic and exhausting and absolutely perfect. Priscilla sometimes looked at her life and marveled at how far she had come from that desperate woman stumbling along a canyon road, barely clinging to life and hope. That woman had been convinced she would never know peace or safety or love. That woman had been so afraid of being hurt again that she had almost refused Xander's help, but she had taken a chance. She had whispered those words, "Please don't leave me here," and he had stayed. He had seen her scars, all of them, and instead of turning away, he had moved closer. He had shown her that love did not have to hurt, that a man could be strong without being violent, that she deserved to be treasured. One afternoon in the summer of 1890, when she was 37 and Xander was 41, they rode out together to the spot where he had first found her. They had been back a few times over the years, always around the anniversary of that day, to remember and be grateful. The canyon looked the same, red rocks rising stark against the blue sky, the road dusty and lonely. It was hard to imagine now that she had almost died here, that this place had been the lowest point of her life. "You ever regret it?" Xander asked as they sat on their horses side by side. "Taking a chance on a stranger?" "Never," Priscilla said firmly. "That was the best decision I ever made." "Well, second best. What was the first?" "Deciding to run in the first place. If I had stayed in Virginia City, I would have died there one way or another. Running gave me a chance at life. You gave me a reason to live it." They rode back to the ranch hand in hand, their horses keeping an easy pace. When they crested the hill that overlooked their valley, they paused to take in the view. The ranch had grown over the years. There were more buildings now, more corrals, more land under cultivation. The herd had grown to over 300 head, and Xander's horses were known throughout California and Nevada for their quality. But more than that, it was full of life. Their children were playing in the yard. Jesse and 2 other hired hands were working with horses in the training pen, and smoke rose from the chimney of the house that had become so much more than just a building. It was a home filled with love and laughter and all the messy, beautiful reality of a family. "We built something good here," Xander said. "We did. We really did." That night, after the children were in bed and the house was quiet, Priscilla stood at the window of their bedroom, looking out at the stars. Xander came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how different my life could have been, about how close I came to never finding this happiness. But you did find it. We found each other." "Against all odds," she agreed. "A woman running from her past and a cowboy tracking a horse. What were the chances?" "I do not believe in chances. I believe in fate. You were meant to be on that road that day, and I was meant to find you." "Do you believe in forever, Xander Whitmore?" "I believe in our forever, the one we are building together day by day." She turned in his arms to face him. In the moonlight streaming through the window, she could see the lines time had etched on his face, the silver threading through his dark hair. He was not the young man who had found her on that canyon road, and she was not the broken woman he had saved. They had grown and changed together, shaped by love and life and all the challenges they had faced and overcome. "I love you," she said. "I will love you until my last breath and beyond. I love you too. My brave, beautiful Priscilla, my wife, my partner, my heart." He kissed her then, deep and sweet, a kiss that held all the years behind them and all the years still to come. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. Outside, the wind whispered through the pines and the stars wheeled overhead in their ancient dance. The cattle settled for the night, and in the barn, horses shuffled in their stalls. The children dreamed peacefully in their beds, safe and loved and completely unaware of the darkness their mother had survived to give them this bright, beautiful life. And in the main bedroom of the ranch house, two people who had found each other against all odds held each other close and knew, with absolute certainty, that they had found their forever. Thomas was 16 now, and he had his father's way with horses. He could gentle the wildest Mustang with patience and soft words, and buyers came from as far as San Francisco to purchase horses he had trained. Charlotte, at 14, had become an accomplished rider who could outshoot most men and was not afraid to prove it. Samuel, 7, was the quiet one, always reading or drawing pictures of the mountains and horses. The twins, Rose and Lily, 5 years old and identical in appearance but completely different in personality, kept everyone on their toes with their mischief and energy. Priscilla watched her children grow with a mixture of pride and bittersweet awareness that time was passing too quickly. She made sure to teach her daughters to be strong and independent, to never accept less than they deserved from anyone. She taught her sons to be gentle and respectful, to understand that real strength was shown in kindness, not violence. And every day, in 100 small ways, Xander showed her that the choice she had made to trust him all those years ago had been the right one. He still looked at her like she was the most precious thing in his world. He still reached for her hand when they walked together. He still kissed her good night every evening and good morning every dawn. Their love had not faded with time. If anything, it had deepened, becoming richer and more complex, woven through with shared memories and experiences, with children raised and challenges overcome, with laughter and tears and all the ordinary magic of a life lived together. In 1895, when Priscilla was 42, she received a letter from Nevada. Her hands shook as she opened it, afraid it might be something from her past coming back to haunt her. But it was from a lawyer, informing her that Dutch Carver had died in prison, where he had been sent for robbery and assault. The lawyer was reaching out because Dutch, in a deathbed confession, had admitted that he and Robert Vaughn had abused Priscilla terribly, and that she had been defending herself when Robert died. The confession was on record now, clearing her name permanently. There would be no more looking over her shoulder, no more fear that someone might connect Priscilla Whitmore with Priscilla Vaughn. She showed the letter to Xander that evening, and he read it with a grim expression. "How do you feel?" he asked when he finished. "Free," she said simply. "For the first time in 20 years, I feel completely free. It is over, all of it. The past cannot touch me anymore." They burned the letter in the fireplace that night, watching the paper curl and blacken and turn to ash. It felt like a ritual, a final closing of a door that had been open too long. "It is just you and me and our children now," Xander said. "No shadows, no fear, just us and the life we have built." "Just us," Priscilla agreed, and felt the last knot of tension she had carried for so long finally unravel. The children grew and began to make their own paths. Thomas, at 21, married a girl from Truckee named Sarah, and they built a house on the eastern edge of the ranch property. Charlotte, 19 and fiercely independent, announced she wanted to go to San Francisco to study medicine. It was an unconventional choice for a woman, but Priscilla and Xander supported her dream, knowing their daughter had the strength and intelligence to succeed. Samuel, 12, had developed a talent for drawing and painting, capturing the beauty of the Sierra Nevada mountains in ways that took Priscilla's breath away. The twins, 10, were inseparable, and had recently decided they wanted to learn to train horses like their father and older brother. In 1899, Thomas and Sarah made Xander and Priscilla grandparents for the first time with the birth of a daughter they named Grace. Holding her granddaughter for the first time, Priscilla was overwhelmed with emotion. This tiny, perfect baby represented the future, a future that existed because Priscilla had chosen to survive, to run, to take a chance on a strange cowboy who offered her kindness when she needed it most. "She is beautiful," Xander said, looking over Priscilla's shoulder at the baby. "She is. And she will grow up knowing only love and safety. She will never know the fear we knew. Because of you, because you were brave enough to break the cycle." Priscilla looked up at her husband, this man who had saved her in every way a person could be saved. "We broke it together." The new century arrived with celebration and hope. On New Year's Eve 1900, the entire Whitmore family gathered at the ranch house. Thomas and Sarah with baby Grace. Charlotte, home from San Francisco for the holidays, full of stories about her medical studies. Samuel, now 14 and nearly as tall as his father. Rose and Lily, 12 and already turning heads whenever they rode into town. They ate dinner together around the table that Xander had built 20 years ago, passing plates and sharing stories and laughing at jokes only family would understand. After dinner, they all bundled up and went outside to watch for midnight, standing together in the yard as the stars wheeled overhead and the mountain wind sang through the pines. When the clock struck 12, marking the beginning of a new century, Xander pulled Priscilla close and kissed her. "Here is to the next 100 years," he said. "We will not make it quite that long," she teased. "Then here is to however many years we have left and making every one of them count." Around them, their children celebrated, but Priscilla was focused on this moment, on the feeling of Xander's arms around her and the sound of her family's happiness ringing in the night air. She thought back to that woman on the canyon road, dying of thirst and wounds and despair, who had whispered, "Please don't leave me here." He had not left her. He had stayed, and in staying he had given her everything. A home, a family, a love that had healed wounds she thought would never close. A future she had never dared to dream possible. "Thank you," she whispered against his chest. "For what?" "For seeing my scars and staying. For loving me when I did not know how to love myself. For giving me this life." Xander pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. "Thank you for trusting me, for taking a chance on a stranger, for choosing to stay when you could have run. Every good thing in my life comes from that day I found you." They stood together under the stars as the new century began. Two people who had found each other when both needed saving, who had built something beautiful from pain and fear and the simple decision to hold on and not let go. The years continued to unfold, bringing new challenges and new joys. Charlotte graduated from medical school and returned to Truckee, setting up a practice that served the mountain communities. She never married, dedicating her life to healing others, but she was happy and fulfilled in her work. Samuel moved to San Francisco to study art seriously, and his paintings of the Sierra Nevada began to sell to wealthy patrons who appreciated his unique vision. He wrote long letters home describing the city and his studies, always ending with the promise that no matter where his art took him, the ranch would always be his true home. Rose married a rancher from a neighboring property, and Lily married a teacher from town. Both settled close by, visiting often with their children, adding to the growing Whitmore clan. Thomas took over more and more of the ranch operations as Xander began to slow down. Xander was nearing 60 now, and while he was still strong, he no longer had the stamina of his youth. He was content to let his son handle the day-to-day work, while he focused on breeding and training the special horses that had become his legacy. Priscilla, at 53, had gray threading through her red hair, and her hands showed the work of decades on a ranch. But she was still beautiful to Xander, still the woman he had fallen in love with on that porch all those years ago. She kept the house, helped with the grandchildren, and worked in her beloved garden, growing vegetables and flowers that made their valley even more beautiful. On a summer evening in 1907, Xander and Priscilla rode out to their spot in the canyon one last time. They were both older now, moving a bit slower, but they still rode well and easily together, their horses side by side. They stood at the place where he had found her 31 years before, looking at the red rocks and the dusty road. "I would not change a single moment," Priscilla said. "Not the pain, not the fear, not any of it, because it all led me here to you, to this life." "I would change the pain if I could," Xander said honestly. "I would change what you had to endure, but I would not change us. We are the same thing, the pain and us. One could not exist without the other. Then I am grateful for every moment, even the hard ones, because they gave me you." They stood together in the golden afternoon light, two people who had found their forever against all odds, who had built something lasting and true from the broken pieces of their pasts. When they rode back to the ranch that evening, they moved slowly, savoring the journey, knowing that every ride together was precious. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple, and the first stars were beginning to emerge. At the ranch, their children and grandchildren were waiting, having gathered for a family dinner. The house was full of noise and laughter and love, 3 generations united by the bonds that Xander and Priscilla had forged all those years ago. That night, after everyone had gone home or gone to bed, Xander and Priscilla sat on the porch in their usual spots. They were quiet, just being together, hands linked, watching the stars. "I would do it all again," Priscilla said softly. "Every moment with you." "I would find you again," Xander replied. "In every lifetime, on every road, I would always find you and I would always stay. Promise, promise. From the moment I saw your scars, I knew I was meant to stay forever, and I have, and I will for as long as we both have breath." She leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat like that until the moon rose high and the night grew deep. Inside the house, their grandchildren slept peacefully, and their children rested, secure in the knowledge that they were part of something strong and good and lasting. The love story that began with a whispered plea and a cowboy's decision to stay had blossomed into something bigger than either of them could have imagined. It had become a family, a legacy, a testament to the power of choosing love over fear, of seeing someone's scars and loving them not despite those scars but including them, understanding they were part of what made them strong. Years later, when they were both old and gray, sitting on that same porch they had sat on thousands of times before, Priscilla would still sometimes reach over and take Xander's hand. And he would squeeze back, no words needed, both understanding that they had been given something rare and precious. They had found their forever. They had built their happily ever after. Not perfectly, not without challenges, but with love and determination and the simple decision made every single day to choose each other. And when their time finally came, many years after that night when the new century began, they went peacefully, within days of each other, as though neither could bear to be without the other for long. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren gathered to mourn and to celebrate, to remember and to tell stories of the woman who survived against all odds and the cowboy who saw her scars and chose to stay forever. The ranch continued on, passed down through generations, a living testament to the love that built it. And on quiet evenings, when the wind whispered through the pines and the stars emerged over the mountains, some said you could still feel their presence there. Two souls intertwined, watching over the home they created together, the love they shared, and the legacy they left behind. It was a story that would be told and retold in the Whitmore family for generations. The story of a woman who whispered, "Please don't leave me here," and a cowboy who saw her scars and stayed forever. A story of love conquering fear, of healing and hope, of two broken people who found each other and became whole. And in that story, in that love, in that choice to stay, they found their happily ever after.